welcome to the Photography Accelerator Workshop. My name's Luke and today we're in the heart of London. I'm shooting right outside Big Ben, right next to Westminster Bridge, and we're going to do a mini photo essay. Now, I love doing photo essays as they really help focus the brain. Sometimes it can be a bit too abstract if you're just going to go out with your camera with no purpose. So photo essays are really good to focus the brain and to give you a purpose. And what we're going to do is we're going to document this site. So the first thing I like to do when I do a photo essay or before I do any photography is to scan the site and see what things I like and dislike about the scene. So one thing I really like, if you can see in this shot here, I've got this lovely lead line leading your eye all the way to Big Ben in the distance. So that's a really good asset to the scene, and it's actually one of the main reasons why I'm photographing this place. Now, some of the things I really don't like about the scene is the light's a bit flat today, and you can see you've got scaffolding on Big Ben. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can really do about this, so we're just going to have to work with it. Now, if you look down here, you can see that's quite messy. So if I was going to do some photography down here, then I have to be quite careful as well to make sure I don't get any clutter in the scene as well. So that's another thing to focus on. And the tide's out as well, so it's not as attractive when the tide's out as to when it's at high tide as well. These are some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we're composing our scenes, but there's still so much value to be had here is that we can definitely get some good shots. I'm confident of that. So let's get started. So this is a really good setup here, and a lot of my students have done this in the past. So as you can see to my left, we've got the lead line, and then we've got Big Ben, and then we've got the Houses of Parliament to the right. Now, yes, we have the lead line, so that's really good. We have Big Ben, so we have a focal point, that's really good. But we only have half the Houses of Parliament, so we're not really doing that justice. And we're adding too much into the scene and we're diluting Big Ben. So a classic thing that we can do, which works really well, is if I move the camera to this side and get something like this. Now we have a really strong lead line, got rid of all the distracting element of the Houses of Parliament, and we've added much more focus to our shot. And in my opinion, I think this is a much stronger photo. So now that we've found our scene, we found our composition, it's time to start talking about the technical aspects of photography. So, as it's a cloudy day, the first thing I'm going to do is set my ISO to ISO 400. That's sort of my go-to cloudy day setting. As we're capturing a big scene, we're going to be keeping my aperture quite high. So that's going to be round about aperture f14. Now, when it comes to shutter speed, well, that's whatever it has to be to capture the scene. Taking a few shots now, and I was really happy with the result. I could focus more on composition and less time worrying about having too slow shutter speed and having the chance of a shaky shot. So that's all there is to do on this scene. There's a scene right behind me that I'm going to capture, and it's going to be a really good setup. Hopefully you can see behind me this is our next scene now, and if I can adjust the exposure slightly, you'll see that it gets darker, and if I stand in the right place, we have Big Ben in the center of the archway. So that's the shot that we're going to try and capture now. So there's some things we need to focus on when we're capturing the scene. The first one is exposure. Exposure is really, really important. Depending where we expose to, we can expose into the archway, so that brings the eye to the front of the scene. Or we can expose to Big Ben, that brings the eye to the back of the scene. Obviously, Big Ben is the start of the show, and that's where we want you to spend your time focusing. So exposure is really important for this scene here. Another aspect of the scene that's really important is accuracy. Now, we want to have purpose when we're placing Big Ben in the center of the arch. So as the arch has a point on the apex, ideally for me, I want to have Big Ben directly below the arch. This gives it purpose, and there's logic behind this. So that's what I'm going to try and focus on now. So I'm going to take a few shots. Another really good aspect to the scene is you can actually add people into the scene as well. Now, adding people is always good. It adds that sort of human element that people can relate to more, and also it adds scale, so you can see how big things are. So what I managed to do is I've just taken a few shots now, and I managed to take Big Ben and had someone in the foreground. And personally, I think that makes it a much stronger photo. Now, when it comes to camera settings, I put it at aperture 14, about 2/200th of a second. And then ISO 400, and then I was just playing the shutter speed to get that perfect exposure, to make sure that I was exposing to the right part of the scene. On the whole, I was really pleased with the shots and how they worked out. But I'm going to move to the next location now because it actually stinks of wee here and it's really disgusting. So let's go to the next location. This time we're at our next scene, but we're at a higher elevated level. So it just gives a different perspective. But the concept's still the same. We've got the beautiful lead line and we've got the Big Ben just behind me. Now we're going to incorporate this into a really good photo, so let's get started. Personally, I find this shot a lot easier than shots lower down because there's more space to work with. It's brighter and it's just a more simplistic scene to capture. You can only stand in a few places, whereas before I really had to work the angles to get the perfect setup. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a few shots and we'll see how we get on. I've just taken a few shots now, and big shots mean high apertures. So I was on aperture 14. I was actually on about 500th of a second because there's a lot more light out here than there is lower down. And I was on about ISO 400, and I was really happy with the shots I got so far. So what I'm going to do now that I've got the big shots is start picking out the details. So let's have a look and see if we can find some details to capture as well. So because I'm capturing the details, I'm going to switch out my 35mm to my 50mm lens, and I'm probably going to be shooting on a slightly lower aperture value, around about f2, f1.4 setup, to sort of blur out the background and pull out the details. Behind me is the shield. Now I really like this detail. It sort of embolises what this bridge is all about. It's obviously very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my aperture down to f1.4 to f2, keep the ISO to where I've had it previously, which is ISO 400. I just increase the shutter speed to get that perfect exposure. So I'm going to take a few shots now and let's see how we get on. Just taking a few shots now of the shield emblem on the bridge. And it's a really simple shot, but there's just some things you've got to keep your eye on. And the first one is composition. Make sure you just frame the shot really well. There's nothing too fancy you can do here, but just to compose nicely and solidly, and to make sure that you haven't cropped anything out of the scene. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few more details and let's see how we get on. That's it for today. I'm really happy with how the shots turned out. I've got some really big scenes of the lead lines and the framing, and then I worked my way through into the details to tell that full picture. Unfortunately, the light was a bit flat today and the scaffolding on Big Ben didn't help, but I think I've done all the hard work today, so when I have good light and the work on Big Ben's been completed, then I can know exactly where to stand to get the key shots to create my masterpieces. Anyway, that's it for today, and I can't wait to see you in our next video. On a side note, I was here yesterday and there's a march happening in London today about the Brexit, and there was a bit of graffiti just here on the wall, and there was a bit of graffiti just up here, and that, in fact, if you look on the floor, that blue paint is related to that, and the water on the floor is related to that graffiti there. Well, fortunately for you guys, I actually took the photos yesterday. Obviously they tried to get rid of them today, and I'm suspecting that the reason why they got rid of them is because the graffiti was of a prominent political figure, which they didn't want anyone to see. But luckily, for us photographers, we have our cameras and we capture things like this.